Hi, this is Dr. Jose Saldivar with another episode of the Way to College podcast. Um, the wonderful thing about the podcast is I have this opportunity to speak to amazing people and wonderful people, and today's guest is no different from a lot of my other guests. Although this guest, wow, I don't know, I've known this guest since I think second grade. And so I'm gonna let her introduce herself and tell her story um, before we get started. So, Camelia, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Camelia Rubalcada. I am originally from Elsa, Texas, graduated in 97 and then moved to Iowa for about 20 years. Um, Finished my education out there, got a bachelor's from the University of Iowa, master's from the University of Northern Iowa, and then 20 years later moved back to the RGV to work as a director for the TRIO Student Support Services program. Thank you for having me here.
So, Camelia, thank you for joining me. I always ask my guests, uh, you know, I knew you as a student. I remember you in school, and I think you have a really fascinating story. So I'm going to give you a little set a little bit of context. So because of social media and it's easy to like find people and come across people, right? And social media recommends like, oh, you may know this person.
Mhm.
And I don't know how I came across your profile. I think it was on Facebook. And I think when I came across it, I had just started maybe my doctoral work. And I saw it and I saw what you're doing. And I think there was a picture of you with what's his name? Black theorist. Is it Michael Eric Dyson?
Mhm.
And I saw it and I thought, oh my God, that is so cool. But it is also like it was just so surprising. I didn't because I don't think I'd heard from you or heard of you since we left high school.
Mhm.
So, Camelia, I always ask my guests if you had to go back and if you said my educational journey started here, where did your educational journey start for you?
So I think even though my past is not the traditional past that many people in education have, um, I want to say that I think it still started for me and when I was younger, right? So even though I was not making the best choices in, oh my goodness, I think since middle school, all the way up until I graduated high school, I knew I always wanted to go to college, right? I always told myself I was going to go to Yale, Harvard, or Stanford, and I was going to be a lawyer. So I think it started even then, but I got sidetracked and I had to be put on hold, right? I got knocked up in high school. And then, I had to start working and taking care of a family. And even though I wanted to go to college, it was hard. I tried it. So, and I think another reason that motivated me to finish high school is because I remember Mr. Gutierrez would always say, get out of the hallway and go get an education, right? And I'm like, I'm going to prove this guy wrong that I'm going to graduate and go to college, right? And so, yeah, I graduated high school, but what did that mean? It's not just about graduating high school, it's about what else can you do with it, right? So I graduated high school and I remember walking to get my diploma and I'm like, I told you, because he was standing there and I told you I was going to graduate. So that was, I think, a motivating factor for me is that people doubted me because probably of the way that I spoke, the people that I hung out with, the choices I was making. And I think that's a big problem that a lot of people have is that they judge a lot of us who are underdogs. I'm an underdog and I'm proud of that because I think I came out on top in many different ways, but it started back in high school for me.
So, Camelia, let me ask. Thank you for that. Um, you consider yourself an underdog, right? Um, so as an underdog, because I was not an underdog in high school,
Yeah.
right? I was on the other side, right?
Yes.
But I remember like for me the most frustrating thing like for me, the most frustrating thing was I remember being a senior in high school, and because I was in football, like there were guys on the football team that were underdogs. There were guys that's all they had. They had football and they didn't have
Mhm.
anything else. They weren't the greatest students, but they passed because they wanted to play.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the most frustrating thing was after the football season, it was like nobody cared about a lot of those kids.
Mm.
And I remember like trying to help kids register for like the SAT or ACT,
Mhm.
like my teammates, and feeling like for me, I think I realized it at that point. Here are a group of people that go to the same school
Mhm.
and have very different realities. Like
Mhm.
their experiences in the school are very different. And it's not a big school. It wasn't like we had, like, I think our graduating class was like 268 or something.
Yeah.
But, among those, everybody's experience was so different.
Mhm.
What was your experience like?
I think my experience, I had a good experience in high school. I had a lot of fun. Um, but what I do remember is because of the reputation that I had and being a teenage mother, I don't recall many people taking interest in me and saying, hey, this is how you need to prepare for college,
Hmm.
right? I feel like because of that, now the individuals who did try to reach out to me and support me, because of the person that I was, I pushed those individuals away. So I remember it was Ms. Garcia. There were two Ms. Garcias in biology. The one with short hair, and I think she wore glasses. Oh my goodness, she tried her hardest to mentor me. Like, she saw potential in me. And I just was rude. I was disrespectful. I didn't take in that. And eventually, people, have to accept their role in that person's life, right? I see that now. So when people did see potential in me, I did notice that I was one of the reasons why I didn't get that additional continued support. But I don't remember counselors talking to me about college. I remember I was pregnant when we had senior pictures, and they were like, you have to come in and get out and take the photo. Like, they didn't even give me a lot of chance to connect with others. It was like, oh, we can't have teenage mothers on campus, pregnant individuals. That's the feeling that I got. But I did feel that my experience, even though it was fun and I still had some good experiences, when it came to preparing me for a life after high school, I did not get that assistance. Kind of like how you were saying that you wanted to help some of your teammates, right? And some of my individuals who were going to college, they had to sometimes separate themselves from us because they were afraid to be kicked out of the basketball team, right? Or
Mhm.
any other involvement that they had. So sometimes they had to separate themselves because their teachers and others were telling them, if you hang around that crowd, you're going to miss out on this. So those were some of the experiences that I saw. And so it was for college, I didn't feel that there was a lot of guidance there.
So you you're pregnant,
Mhm.
graduating as you're finishing up high school. And you said after high school, you had to put like those college dreams on hold, right? You're raising a family and providing for the family. How did you make your way from Elsa to Iowa?
So what happened is I graduated. I proved Mr. Gutierrez wrong, right? That I was going to graduate. And I did try going to college. But remember, I didn't get that extra support from counselors where they teach you what skills you need to continue to be successful in college, right? So I went in with the same mindset to college that I had in high school. I don't care. I'm going to get a C. I'll graduate. I'm out of here. I'll get my degree, right? That was my mindset. And so that first year in college, I didn't do so well. I had a baby, I had to work, and then I was trying to be full-time student, right? So I ended up not doing so well the first year in college. This job opportunity presented itself. Um, they were recruiting people to go work in Iowa. And at that time, my ex-husband, he had just lost his job. And so I said, let's go for it. It's only for 6 months. They're going to pay us to go to get there. They're going to get us a hotel and we're going to have a job. And so we ended up going, and 6 months turned into 18 years. And the reason it turned into 18 years is because it was a very different environment from what I had been a part of or seeing growing up. And there was a lot more opportunities out there. So when I ended up staying for 18 years, I think. Mm-hmm.
Talking to, and you work with young people here, right? And I work with young people, and I often find that a lot of our students are reluctant to leave. What gave you the courage to say, let's try this? They're gonna pay us, they're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the type of person that I am, I'm not afraid of a challenge. And so I knew I always wanted to go places. Like I said, I wanted to go to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. And I was like, let's just go, right? And the thing is, like, people were telling me not to go. People that had never really left the Valley were telling me, don't go to Iowa. This is how the people are going to treat you. There's nothing but corn there, things like that. That's what they were telling me. And so it's like, well, you know what? Let me check it out for myself. And then I can decide whether or not it's a place for me. And leaving the Valley was one of the best decisions I had ever made for myself. I'm so glad that I left. My family ended up coming with us. At that time, my brother was involved in, so-called gangs here in the Valley. And he ended up going over there and changing his life around. My sister was struggling with some substance abuse addiction, and she ended up going to Iowa and changing her life, graduating from college. So I feel like leaving the Valley for me was one of the best decisions I could ever make.
So you go to Iowa, you're
Mm-hmm.
working. How long were you there before you decided, you know what, I'm going to give college another try?
So I got there, let me say, graduated in 97. Oh my goodness, so long ago, but I graduated in 97. And then I think it was like 99 when I thought about going back. And I tried it again for another semester or two, and then I got pregnant again. So and then my car got on fire. So it's just so many things happening.
So you were saying, you were there and you decided to, enroll in college. And so tell me about that. Like what was it that encouraged you to apply and get back to school?
Well, I knew that that was a goal of mine. So I got there in, I believe, 98, July 4th of 98. And I enrolled in school that fall semester and spring. And then I got pregnant again, and then my car got on fire. So I was like, oh man, this is not a sign to go back to school, right? So I had to stop out. And it wasn't until probably close to 27 years old when I decided that I was gonna go back again. I had tried several times, even after that first year I got there. I tried going back again a few years later. And I was doing really well, but what happened, because I didn't know a lot about for-profit institutions, I enrolled in a for-profit institution. I was told that all my classes would transfer when I would complete. And as I was preparing to finish that degree, I was going to transfer to the University of Iowa. And I called them to make sure that my classes that I had already taken were going to transfer. And they said that not all of them were going to transfer. So I was like, okay, so I'm $10,000 in debt, and now I have to retake these classes. So I just stopped attending school. I was like, I'm done. I'm just gonna go to a different school from this point forward. And I did try going to a different school. I was ready to start again. And then here's another thing happening in my life. I'm going through a divorce, and I had never really hung out or gone out to the club because, I had a baby at 17. So as I'm going through my divorce, I'm going out Saturday nights, right? And I'm drinking and going out Saturday nights. I was over 21 years old. So anyways, I'm going out. And then it was Friday, Saturday, then Tuesday through Saturday, and trying to take a 8 a.m. biology class is not going to work when you're partying 6 days a week. So I flunked out again from school. And this time I got even worse. I lost my financial aid for 5 years. So it wasn't until I was 27 when I decided to go back. And I told myself, okay, I have spent 10 years of my life bullshitting, right? Working jobs that just barely making ends meet, trying to go to school, but not doing it the right way, the way that works for me, right? So I said, if I'm going to go back this time, it's going to be all or nothing. And if it's not going to be all of it, then I'm not going to waste my time anymore. So I decided to go back. And this time I only took certain classes, 2 or 3 classes a semester that I knew would work with my job. I was sitting in the front of the class, every start of the class, every semester. I was in tutoring office 2, 3, 4 times a week. I was in professor office hours. So I had to change my behavior and my mindset to be able to be successful. And that was how I ended up back in college at a nonprofit this time. And even until that point, I didn't know still a lot about how college works, right? So I just assumed that everybody gets accepted into the University of Iowa. I had no idea that there was a possibility that I would not get accepted. Thankfully, I got accepted, right? But I didn't learn that until I started working there. You know, I was like, oh man, good. I'm so glad I got accepted into the university. And so that was the things that transpired in my life that led me to change the way that I thought about school, how I was going to approach it. And I was still planning to be a lawyer when I went back. I was going to do business law. But during my experience, unfortunately, I didn't have a good advisor, right? This advisor knew my plan was to go get a business law. I wanted to get into the College of Business at the University of Iowa. And they required a 2.7 GPA to get admitted into the program. I had about a 2.5 something. No matter how many A's or B's I got, all those bad grades from back then was making it very difficult to raise my GPA. So the advisor didn't tell me, and I applied. I got denied. So then I appealed. I got denied again. So then I'm like, look, I got to meet the person that keeps denying me, because I need to find out why I'm not getting accepted into this program if I'm doing different now. And I met with the person, and he's like, look, you're not getting in, basically, because I want honesty, right? Yeah. And so he's like, look, you're not getting in. I see that you're doing really well from back then, but it's still not going to happen. We're not going to let you into the program. And I was already a student at the University of Iowa. So I really appreciated his honesty. We still connect with each other till this day. And so during that process, because of that door closing on me and seeing that I didn't have a good advisor to guide me in the right way, like she could have said, okay, what things are you good at, right? So that we can get A's in these classes. I could have taken Spanish classes. I could have done something to really raise the GPA that I needed. So in that process, I already had probably like a year left, I think, to graduate, a year and a half, I think. And so now I'm thinking, okay, I'm 30 some, I got 3 kids. Now I got to stay here I owe so much money to college. Now I got to stay here another 3 years. Like, what am I going to do now? And they had me connect with other individuals. And they were starting this new degree called interdepartmental business degree. And they're like, this is a new degree that we think could work for you. And I'm like, look, I think to me, it sounds like a bullshit degree. It sounds to me like you're trying, yeah. I'm like, it sounds to me like you're trying to give me something just to say, hey, thanks for your time. We don't want you to leave empty handed, but here you go, right? I'm like, what can I do with that degree? Like, marketing is marketing, finance is finance. But then the individuals that I would meet with, they're like, look, you've been working since the age of 17, right? You have professional experience. Look at the personality that you bring. Like, you're not going to have a hard time finding a job. This is going to help open up some doors for you. So I'm still not convinced that this is the degree for me, right? So I'm looking at other degrees, and I had to go to the advisor and the career advisor that I had met. And I go and I said, look, don't bullshit me. give it to me straight. I'm 30 some, I got 3 kids. Should I work on my GPA or take this degree? One of them is like, look, you're not getting any younger. Okay, now let's talk, right? Like, that's what I want to hear. Like, let's talk. So it made no sense to go for the GPA, right, to raise it. And they're like, if you take this degree, you will graduate next summer. I said, perfect, let's do it, right? So then I was like, okay, this is not the end for me. I'm going to go get my master's, because now I want to do higher ed. I want to be the voice for the students who are not told the truth, who are not helped, right? Who are told someone else's journey. So because of these amazing individuals that I met, that even though they denied me access to what I wanted, I think they were still very helpful, very honest. They understood my background and what I was trying to do. So I was like, okay, now I'm going to go for a master's. And my good friend, Dave Gould, he's the one that told me, look, you're not getting any younger, right? So we became really good friends. Then he's like, look, I know you want to do the master's, but you don't have a 3.0. You have a 2.54. And I'm like, well, let me exhaust all my options before I give up that notion, right? Because I want to be a voice for students now. So I was going to apply to the University of Iowa's Student Affairs program. And I actually met with the director and I said, look, I don't have the GPA, but I'm going to really study for the GRE. I'm going to get a really good score. Will they even look at my application? And her first thing was, have you looked at these other schools that have the same program? When she said that, you know, they don't want you in the program, right? So I was like, no, I have not. And so thankfully she told me what schools they were. And I called, one of them was in Illinois, and I was like, look, I don't have a 3.0. Let me know now if they're going to look at my application, because if they're not, I'm not paying the $35 to apply, right? And the lady's like, look, send us in your information, because sometimes there's another way to get to a 3.0. And I said, okay. So I sent her the information. She's like, you were close, but they're not going to look at your application. I said, perfect. I don't want to waste any money, right? Thank you. My last school was at the University of Northern Iowa. I think there was like a snowstorm or something, and I had an appointment up there. So I had to drive 2.5 hours to meet with this person. And his name is Dr. Wagner. I am so thankful to Dr. Wagner. So I drive up there. I tell him my story, how I had made choices that were not the best, but this is what I learned. This is what I want to do. This individual had no application, no letters of rec, no transcript, just my story. He was like, okay, send me an email when you get back so that I can be reminded what we talked about. Let me see if there's something that can be done, because there's an assistantship and they help with tuition, but you have to have these requirements, which is a 3.0 and everything else. I said, okay. So I sent him an email. 2 weeks later, I get an email that says, congratulations, you're accepted, finish your application. I was like, oh my goodness. So that was my story into getting my master's. Yes.
So I think one, I mean, what persistence, right? I mean, I think to continue and your story, I think is inspiring, right? Because I think a lot of times the doors are closed in front of us. Our circumstances can certainly provide us with a number of obstacles, and here you had a number of things that happened along the way that I think for most people would have discouraged anybody from continuing. And so to see you persist and persist and persist through ups and downs and through just everything that you went through, I think, wow, that's just amazing. But I also knew there was a great story there. That's why I wanted you to join me, because I thought, okay, there's got to be this interesting story with them. And not that, you know, all of my guests have interesting stories, right? But everybody's story is so unique. And so, you know, one of the reasons for the podcast is because I want to give young people different experiences. I want them to recognize that there's not one path.
Mm-mm.
Wherever it is that we're going in our journey, it's not one path, and it's not decided when you're 18. It's not decided when you're 20, right? We have multiple opportunities to, to influence where we go, right? And opportunities to make good decisions and bad decisions. And so I really appreciate your story, Camelia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that we take a break here,
Okay.
and we're going to come back
All
and
right.
finish because I know there's a second part. I want to finish it. So let me stop recording really quick.
Okay.
So.